Hey friends, hey, it's your favorite host, LaDonna PM here. Listen, I know you're busy enjoying my podcast, The Owner's Manual, but have you ever wanted to have your own podcast? You heard me right. You can do this too. Just like I mentioned in episode 2 of The Owner's Manual, shameless plug, the world needs your voice of inspiration and genius. You can have your very own podcast using Anchor, and it's so easy. You don't need any special equipment. Although that's nice, you can do it right from your sofa and your cell phone. No joke. It costs $0. Yep, you heard me right. It's free 99. And all the tools that you need to customize your podcast are at your fingertips. Anchor even distributes your podcast for you, so you can be heard on multiple platforms like Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and so much more. And you can easily monetize your podcast. So all you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. That's ANCHOR.FM. Hey, I can't wait to listen in. Thank you for joining me for another episode on the Owner's Manual podcast. I am your host, LaDonna PM, aka Miss Purpose Pusher, and the OWN podcast is the #1 destination for us busybodies who want positive perspectives and inspiration to create moments of purposeful pause in our lives. Welcome, friends. This is your host, LaDonna PM, and I am back with another episode of the Owner's Manual podcast. Listen, episode number 7 is today, and I'm so excited to be joining you again. This has been an amazing journey of self-discovery for myself, and I hope that you appreciate each week me coming to you and sharing more tools that you can add to your self-discovery tool bag. So last week, if you joined us for episode number 6, we were talking about self-care for the soul. And at the end of the podcast, I left you with a little song. That's right, my favorite song by India Irie called I Am Light. I sang just a little bit of it, you know what I'm saying? But if you want to listen to that and learn some tips about incorporating self-care for your soul, do me a favor, stop this podcast right now and go back to episode number 6 and get that in your life, okay? Without further ado, after the break, we'll be starting with episode number 7. I'm so excited, and I thank you so much for joining me. You can connect with me on LaDonnaPM.com. That's my website where the blog, the podcast links, resources to see my latest books, and also my office scheduler for me to work with you to help you ignite the flame of purpose within you. All of that can be found, again, on my website, www.LaDonnaPM.com. You can also connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook as LaDonna Patrice. That's the author's blog page. And I'm also on Instagram as LaDonna.PM. Don't ask me. I tried to keep the links consistent, but LaDonna Patrice was already taken. Go figure. Anyway, again, that's LaDonna Patrice on Facebook and LaDonna.PM on Instagram. Hope to see you there. So one of the things that I talk about a lot in my podcast episodes and blogging is journaling. Yes, that is one of the tools that I have in my personal awareness tool bag. It's so important to journal. In fact, I've been journaling since I was a little girl, and I still have most of those journals to this day. I also created a new journal for you all that's available on Amazon, and that is my Love, Peace, and Joy Gratitude Journal. You can use this line journal to write down your daily thoughts of gratitude, or just to journal your thoughts, or even to write encouraging things to yourself, or even to create a mantra, a goal board, or a vision board that you can write inspirational words of power to yourself in. You can find that journal on Amazon. Right now, if you search under LaDonna Mixon, you can find my books there, or you can go to bit.ly/LPM books. Again, that's bit.ly/L as in LaDonna, P as in Patrice, M as in Mixon books. Last week, we introduced something that I'm hoping to continue on the Owner's Manual podcast segment, and that is the soul coaching card of the day. That's right. Last week, I pulled from the Soul Coaching Oracle cards by Denise Lynn, and each week I would love to pull a card that highlights the energy for today, or in other words, what your soul wants you to know. So today I always pull a card for myself to center myself, to provide to you this message, and then I pull a card for you all to share with my listeners. And so the card of the day is called Success. And it simply says, success fills my life in ways beyond my greatest expectations. And the card simply means inner and outer success is coming your way. The gates of triumph are waiting to open deep and wide for you. Accept that you're already a winner, and even more victories will expand in your life. Here's what your soul wants you to know. Being successful is a state of mind. The more you feel it, the more love, prosperity, fame, and fortune will pour into your life. If a situation knocks you over, get up and brush yourself off and discover what you learned. You aren't a failure if you fall down, only if you stay down. So keep going and believe in yourself. Celebrate even the smallest victories that occur in your life. And here's the affirmation for today. Success fills my life in ways beyond my greatest expectations. I hope you've enjoyed that. I am your host, LaDonna PM, and I am so excited to be joining you for episode number 7. Today, we are going to be talking about choosing a new response. Yep, that's right. We are talking about the one thing that everybody experiences, which is fear. It's a natural part of being human. And especially in these changing landscapes and changing ways that we do business and the way that we relate to each other. One of my friends posted the other day that this is not my new normal. And I don't blame her, because this definitely doesn't feel like the type of normal that I would want to adapt. However, it does encourage us to make choices to change as it relates to our families, our way of life, and our businesses. One thing I do know, that the only constant in life is change. And so each day I'm reminded of how we can look at that change and decide how we want to respond to it. And that's why I chose to name this topic for today, choosing a new response, right? So everybody has fears. It's a natural part of being human, like I said. It can protect us from harm by sending us a rush of adrenaline to help us physically deal with potential danger. Or, there are times when fear may keep us from fully immersing ourselves in the experience of life. And once we realize that fear is a state of mind, we can choose to face our fears, change our minds, and create a new paradigm, a new life that we want to live. Our minds are such powerful tools that are used by our highest selves. It's almost like a computer, right? It stores and uses data to make certain connections and differentiations between thought and response. But we have the ability to observe these and choose differently. So no matter where that F word or fear comes from, we can relate and create new connections by choosing new thoughts. So the one thing that I've come to know is when our souls and our minds are in alignment, we create a new experience of reality. You've heard me talk a lot about that, creating new paradigms and alchemizing new realities for ourselves. But believe it or not, this journey requires so many little small steps, as well as giving yourself patience and having courage throughout this process. That's the one thing that we can give ourselves. I don't know about you, but each day I am just coming up with new ways to adapt, new ways to explore what my gifts are, new ways to choose new for myself and for my well-being. And I can totally relate to feeling, uneasy. I've been on both sides of the spectrum. My first response to all the sudden changes and the shifts was quite honestly irritability. I had a moment where I kind of likened myself to, I don't know if you've seen the movie Incredibles. Do you remember the first movie of Incredibles at the end when the babysitter is calling Mr. and Mrs. Incredible and is talking about the baby, like, something's wrong with Jack Jack. That is, and in each message, it became increasingly frantic, like total chaos had ensued. Well, within emotionally, that's how I was feeling. I was a little baby Jack Jack around these parts. Like, I felt like at any moment I could potentially explode. And it wasn't that my life was falling apart or, anything traumatic was happening, because let's face it, even in our worst experiences, there's always someone out there that's going through far worse times than we are. And so I'm reminded every day to be grateful and thankful. But I wouldn't be telling the truth if I sat here today and said that I didn't have a response, an irrational response, a fearful response, a traumatic response of my own to the changes. And that first response was just irritability. I think one thing about myself is like when I'm forced to do something, I realize that I don't want to necessarily do it. So if it's something like, if I'm already doing it, for case in point, in these changing climates, a lot of business owners are being kind of pushed to go online and share and teach and do all these things, right? And I was already on that journey because I feel like inherently my natural nature is to teach, inspire, and create. However, it was just like, I want to do it on my terms. Like, I don't want to be pushed to do it because now we can no longer interact with each other face to face. I want to do it because I feel like there's something on the inside of me that I want to share, and in my due time, I'll get it out. Well, I guess the universe had other plans. It's almost like this is showing us a new side of ourselves where we get to choose different. And while I may not want to choose to be on the side of just extreme busyness and creating meaningless content just for the purpose of doing so, but it forced me to realize the purpose in which I do those things, right? It's a gift from my heart, and it is allowing me to walk in my purpose. But the fact remains that if I'm forced to do it or promote it in order to stay relevant, it kind of takes a lot of the love out of it. So I've had to have a come to LaDonna experience within myself and saying, hey, how are you managing change? What is to be feared by putting yourself out there? What is to be feared by showing your gifts or sharing your light with others? Because really that's what it's about, right? Right. So anyway, I realized that trigger of fear that I experienced with, that caused the feelings of irritability and annoyance was because it was just a nudge for me to accept my responsibility for my purpose. It was my responsibility to walk in confidence of the calling, to be a light worker in a dark world. Really, it was just for me to step up for myself, to say, hey, you can do this. Here we go. And that's all a part of facing fears. Fear can be diminished, just by us taking the bold move to face it. Author Stephen King says, if a fear cannot be articulated, it can't be conquered. Wow. Purposeful pause moment. If a fear cannot be articulated, it can't be conquered. A lot of times we have these irrational fears that we've never sat down to articulate. We've never sat down to discover the root or to figure out where is that coming from. So as I sat down to discover the fear of being seen, or fear of sharing my voice, or fear of, being vulnerable, really, I had to really peel back the layers of where did that originate from. And then I had to do another activity that I'm going to share with you in just a little bit, but it caused me to sift through the veils of what I perceive that fear to be in order to get to the root of the issue and to dismantle it. So one of the things that I've come across is like when I was looking for examples of fear, it's almost like that fear that we had of driving when we were teenagers. Remember that? When we got behind the wheel for the first time and we were terrified, shaking in our boots. I'm going to tell you, the first time I ever drove a stick shift, my mom was teaching me how to drive a stick shift and my little brother was in the back seat. And if you listen, I will gladly take an automatic any day, but learning how to drive as one of my first experiences of stick shift was so traumatic. It was bad enough that I learned on Blanding Boulevard. And for those of you familiar with the Jacksonville surrounding areas, Jacksonville is such a large city. I think it's one of the largest landmass cities in the U.S. So in this particular part of town on Blanding Boulevard, at that time, there were like 4-lane highways, like 2 on each side, I think. Right now, there are probably 4 on each side. But back then, when I was a teenager driving at 16 and trying to learn how to drive, that was very intimidating for me to just be on those busy intersections. And I just remember my heart racing, my confidence was shaking, trying to remember how to let go of the clutch and change the gears and all of that, all while my little brother was in the back seat screaming, "You're going to get us killed." Yeah. Talk about traumatic experiences. Now, while I never got back behind the wheel of a manual car, but the fact remains that we still have those same fears, even when driving an automatic, even when the thought of getting behind this, I don't know how much cars weighs, a couple tons, vehicles, and immersing ourselves into traffic and, having to be alert and paying attention to and having to signal and merge and integrate ourselves in traffic and get off on the exit safely and get to where we need to be. That is super intimidating. But I tell you what, now I drive with ease. And I remember that, especially when my daughter's behind the wheel, to remember that same feelings that I felt, that she has to conquer and face her fears just like I had to. And the same applies for us. Choosing a new response to fear requires us to face it head on, not stuffing it, not diminishing it, not pretending that the changes of the world isn't here for us to experience, but actually conquering it by facing it for what it is, dismantling it, and really choosing how we want our responses to create and shape lives that we want to live and not be stifled by, fear. And so one of the activities that I wanted to share with you, I don't know if you guys watch This Is Us. It's a show. I don't remember the network, but I watch it on Hulu, but it's such a great show. And there's a couple on the show. They're so cute to me, Beth and Randall. They have this activity when they have to deal with life or try to figure out perplexing situations. They have this activity called Worst Case Scenario. And in the activity, they'll list all of the worst case scenarios that could possibly happen, and they just go through them one by one. And that's such a powerful tool, right? Dig into it. There's nothing, I guess it's nothing. I could say that there's nothing more potent in our lives as to dismantle fear. Just really peel apart the layers of it. When we do this activity called worst case scenario, we figure out what's the worst thing that can happen. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down your worst, super ugly case scenario that could possibly happen if you move forward into the fear instead of running from it. I really want you to just dig into it. Just write down what could happen. What are some of the worst case scenarios that you could happen? Right. And then just really allow yourself to go there. Right. Because like Stephen King says, if a fear can't be articulated, it can't be conquered. One of the things I had to do when it came to leaving corporate America and to do my side business full time was really examine the root of the fears that I had felt in order to do that full time. One of the things was I had done this before and it didn't work out. So that fear that was related to past experiences really was trying to be, a factor in keeping me bound. The other thing was I was just thinking like, oh, if I went, full time with this and during the day, will people actually come? Will they come to support my business? How would I make money? And, would I be able to support myself by doing this outside of the corporate 9-to-5 grind where there's a steady paycheck and benefits, et cetera, et cetera? I had to really, look at all of those things that was holding me back. And can I tell you on the other side of that, having been on the other side of that, fully since I would say the winter of 2013, I have had the most amazing experiences by facing my fear and deciding to become a full-time entrepreneur. I have. And I just can only imagine what would have happened if I had stayed bound and stuck in that fear. Choosing a new response to having faith and confidence in myself, allowed me to store those in my experiences and in my tool bags of always constantly remembering how I've made it through, how I was able to make it through difficult circumstances and traumatizing situations, how I was able to still succeed and thrive in the midst of it all. And so that's what choosing new responses require us to do. What's on the flip side of that worst case scenario? So if you were to write down everything that could possibly go wrong, challenge yourself to just dig deep, what would happen? And then you know what else I want you to do? Then I want you to flip the script. I want you to write down the best case scenarios that could possibly happen with you moving forward. Right? Take that list that you wrote of all the worst, horrible case scenarios and flip it. Write down what you could achieve if you were to allow yourself to choose a new, positive, and purposeful response. So that's really what I wanted you to grasp from this topic of today of choosing a different response. And I want you to surrender to it. Surrender to a different response that empowers you and lifts you to your highest potential. I want you to choose a response that allows your inner knowing, your inner being to overwhelm anything that could occur on the outside of you. I want you to choose a different response that lifts both of those polarities to a place of peace and sweet surrender. Allow yourself to surrender to the truth of your experience, no matter how intense or how life-changing or sudden it is at this moment. Surrender to your gifts. Surrender to allowing naturally what needs to come forth. Surrender to remaining unpressured to produce, be, or act in ways that feed fear. Surrender to the inherent nature of a big, all-encompassing God who is love and wants you to thrive, especially in these times. Surrender to being open, aware, and appreciative of creating new experiences of flow, peace, stability, even in shaky times. And surrender to rest, grounding your whole self in patience and acceptance of new responses that bolster our power, our confidence, and our belief that this too shall pass. I pray that you were blessed by this podcast episode and that you've gotten some wonderful tools that you can now use in your tool bag of personal awareness, boosting your confidence, facing and articulating fear, and conquering them. Conquering those things that is a natural part of life. So peace and blessings on your journey. Until next Sunday, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast and all the other podcast episodes that have been presented here each week. It has been my joy and honor to present them to you again. I am your host, LaDonna PM, aka Miss Purposefully Made. I can be found at LaDonnaPM.com, where you can have access to my blog, other podcast links, my resources. You can see the latest books. And you can also get on my schedule to work with me. I can help you ignite the flame of purpose within you. And my calendar is open. You can sign up for a complimentary discovery call with me to help you figure things out. Maybe you just need to have someone hold your hand and keep you accountable who's been there and done that. You can also find me on social media. My Facebook is the LaDonna Patrice. My Instagram is LaDonna.PM. And as always, it is just a joy and an honor and a privilege to bring you the Owner's Manuals podcast each week. The #1 destination for busybodies like you and me to find a place of purposeful pause and positive perspectives. See you next week. All right, friends. So if you've enjoyed today's podcast and you want to stay connected with me, join my Purpose Tribe at bit.ly/LaDonna Inspires. Sign up for my mailing list and receive 2 super awesome curated goodies for you to walk in your purpose. Starting with renewing your mind. You don't want to miss out on these 2 goodies that I curated just for you. Again, you can get those by signing up to the LaDonna PM Purpose Tribe at bit.ly/LaDonna Inspires.